Yo, 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 what is the dealio, y'all? Check this out, man. We got a banger today. In this video, I want to talk about the different stages and the different phases of being a trader, right? I want to let you know it's a journey, point blank, period. It is a journey, and there is no way to get around it, right? But what I want to do is I want to help you identify with where you're at on your journey so that way you're not feeling like you're stuck. You're not feeling like you're not making any progress and things like that because it's videos like this that help you see where you're at and also help you feel seen, and also it helps you understand where you're at on your journey so that way you're not just feeling lost, right? So I've experienced all of these phases right here and all of these levels, and I want you to understand that it's levels to the game, right? It is levels to the game. Nobody great became great by only experiencing the good, by only experiencing one part of the whole journey, right? It's levels, and it's also like, you remember how in school it used to be something called prerequisites to get to, a college class, you had to pass a prerequisite. And so it's the same thing, but the only difference is when we talking about being a trader and trading in the stock market, there isn't a outline of like what is next. So it's an infinite amount of possibilities, but you got to be able to know like where you're at so that you can know where you're going and know what you need to do to get to the next level, right? So what I want to do is I'm going to talk about these levels right here. So we're going to get it started. Before we get it started, I want to say be sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel because I'm bringing you life-changing information every single day. All right? So, first level, first phase, right, of being a trader. I like to call it, and all of these, I basically like just thought about it and I made up my own like title, right? I didn't get this from anywhere. But the first level is like the beginner's luck level, right? Beginner's luck level. This level, you're new, right? You are taking trades, maybe in a trading group, maybe not, but you're taking trades and you're winning. You're making some money, right? And what happens in this phase is you develop this level of like fearlessness, and you also start to get a little bit greedy, right? And the reason is because you don't really understand what a loss feels like. So you got a beginner's luck phase. Not every single person who starts is gonna get beginner's luck and just be on a winning streak. It's not how it happens with every single person. But a lot of people, they get beginner's luck. First couple of trades, they make some money. And what happens is they start to think like, oh man, this is easy. This is easy, right? And then after that, they start thinking that every trade is gonna go like this. And they like, why don't everybody do this? Right? Why people complaining about trading? This stuff is easy. And now I'm not talking about this happens for a month or two, right? It could happen for a month, but I'm talking about first day, first couple days, maybe first week. You may just be winning on a winning streak, right? Now, right, that's the beginner's luck phase. So the next phase we got, I like to call this the traumatized phase, right? Because you get shocked. You get shocked. And everybody goes through it. Everybody goes through it, right? You take an L. And the L that you take is way bigger than what you was expecting. When you was winning, when you was in the beginner's phase, you wasn't having to think about a stop loss or none of that. Because you would get into play and then it would just go up. And then you would take your profits. You was being greedy. You didn't have a price target or none of that stuff, right? You just had the mentality. You just had a positive attitude and things was going in your favor. Then you go to the traumatized phase. Now you like, whoa, you might be sick. Not physically sick, but you're going to experience that physiological shock. You're going to be like, man, I don't know. I wasn't expecting that, right? And this one is going to hit you. You're going to be like, man, I got to, I don't know. You start becoming a little bit hesitant. All that fearlessness is now out of the window. And now you start becoming a little bit fearful, right? So you was on one side of the spectrum, and then you experienced something, and it literally put you to the other side of the spectrum, just like that, right? And that's why I call it a traumatized phase, because now it's like, okay, you're going to have to overcome the shock that you just experienced after you experience winning, right? And this is going to show you and dictate if you really want to do this thing long term. And at this point, right, when you in like the beginner's luck phase, you're like short-term profitable, right? Your account is up $1,000, $1,500 first week. And you like, I could do this. That next week, you give all your gains back, right? Or 2 weeks later, whatever the case is, you get what I'm saying. And then you like, man, I don't know if I want to do this. And it's at that moment right there where you dictate who you gonna become, what your future gonna look like. Because if you give up and you fold, when you get shell shocked, then you're just going back to your life that you just came from, right? So that's the traumatized phase. Now, what the traumatized phase does is, because it slaps you and it shocks you and it puts you into reality, then you start to transition, right? That's why I say this is a journey. You start to transition. Then you transition into what? The locked in phase, right? The locked in phase. And this is the phase where a lot of your time is going to be spent. This is the phase where you start buying them candlestick books. This is the phase where you start learning how to read the charts. You start getting TradingView, right? This is the phase where you start learning how to read the EMAs, how to use the tools. This is the phase when you start learning about your entries, right? This is the phase when you start really, learning about stop losses, because you was so sick and you got traumatized that you like, man, I really need to understand the stop loss. I need to really understand how to use the stop loss, right? Because in the traumatized phase, you may make, 2,000 in a week, but that's not profit because you lost 1,700. So you really only made 300 in that week. And so you starting to really see how much money you could be making, but you start to understand that, man, I got to really clean things up, right? So now you in the locked in phase. And the locked in phase is like, man, I got to figure this out. Because I didn't like how I just lost X amount of dollars when I could have been up 3,000, but I'm only up 200. Or worse, I could have been up 3,000, but I'm really down 700. All because I was being reckless and I was just doing stuff, right? And then you get locked in. And this is where a lot of your time is going to be spent as a trader on your journey, trying to get to the point where you are making consistent profits, right? I spent a lot of my time in the locked in phase. A lot of time, like 6-8 months straight. I started off locked in, but I did have a little bit of beginner's luck, right? And then I did get traumatized and I got smacked, right? My first time I lost like 700-800, I was like, man, I was like pissed off. And then I really started to, I remember when I got traumatized, it was like, I was probably like 6 months in, right? And I had lost like $3,000 in the span of about 2 to 3 weeks. I took a 2.5 week break because I got locked in and I had to study. Because I was like, man, I can't keep doing this. In the beginning, when I was in the beginner's luck phase, I couldn't even really read candlesticks. I was just looking at green and red, and I was just getting into plays. Reckless. Reckless, right? So I got locked in, right? And that locked in phase, it really sets you up. It really changed your life, right? Now the fourth phase, I like to call this the consistent stage, all right? So now you've adjusted, right? You've adjusted. You know you got to show up every day. You're starting to understand that it's not about the big gains. It's about being consistent, consistent profits, 10, 15%. The 50% is going to come. But then 10%, 15%, they're going to add up over time. This is when you start to get consistent and you start to focus on the consistency and the craft, right? So then you start spending your time in that consistent stage. That consistent stage is pretty boring, right? You may take an L, but your L's ain't gonna be nearly as much as what they was when you was in a traumatized phase, right? Because you are starting to understand how this game really works. You in this phase right here, when you in the consistent stage, you feel like I'm this close to breaking it big. I'm this close. Maybe it's just a matter of time. Maybe it's just, I just need a solid week that I could, make 5K in a week. And then I could be able to really, get some breathing room, whatever the case is. But this consistent phase, this is going to take your life to the next level when you master this phase right here, right? You learning your strategy, right? You in a locked in phase, you may have went through all the indicators, not every single indicator, but you may have went through a good amount of indicators. But in a consistent phase, you like, you know what? I don't really like that indicator, but I'm only going to lock in with these 2 indicators or these 3 or 4 indicators. In the consistent phase, you're learning what you really like. You're learning your style of trading. You're learning how you like to trade. You're going to spend a good amount of time in this phase as well. I'm not saying you ain't going to be making no money in this phase. You could make money in this phase. But once you master this phase right here, that's when your income is going to exponentially grow, and you're going to start to see, 5-figure weeks, 5-figure days, right? This consistent phase is pivotal, right? And sometimes what happens is you may get to the consistent phase, you may not be disciplined, you may fall back down to the traumatized phase. And then you got to work your way back up. You may have to get re-locked in, right, for a month and then get back to the consistent phase. Now you're in the consistent phase, the consistent stage for, another month, another 2 months. And then you're like, okay, now I really get it, right? And then that leads us to the last phase and the last stage of your trading journey. And you know what that is? That's the clear skies stage, the clear skies phase. That's when you can withstand whatever L's you take. That's when you're operating out of abundance, right? That's when you're able to pay yourself, all of that. That's when you're able to travel, right? Go to a different country for 2-3 months and trade. That's when you're in the clear skies phase, right? That's when you like, yo, I quit my job phase. That's when you confident in your skill set. That's when you teaching your family. That's when you putting your brother, your sister on, your cousin on, right? That's when you get to that level right there. And at this phase right here, your only job is to, of course, keep showing up, but you got to understand you got a bigger purpose and a bigger duty once you made it to this phase. And it's to be a blessing in the world, right? That's the clear skies stage, the clear skies phase, right? And you may have a bad month one time. You may get traumatized. And then you got to re-lock in to get yourself back up to the phase. So these phases, they ebb and they flow sometimes. But this clear skies phase, once you experience it, that's going to be your new floor. And you always going to, know how to get back there if you do end up falling off. You may get traumatized for a day. The market might crash, and you may have some option calls that you just got in them joints might drop by 60%, right? But because you're in this stage, in this phase, and you have the understanding and you have the maturity, you're gonna know how to handle it. See, when you in the beginner's phase, when you in the traumatized phase, you don't know how to handle these situations. When you in the locked in phase and the consistent phase, that's when you learning how to really handle the situations. But when you get to that clear skies phase, you like, man, I've been here before. I done seen this. I know how to handle this, right? And that's when it starts to really make sense. All right. So I wanted to make this video because I want you to understand that no matter where you at, no matter what you're doing, don't you get discouraged on your journey. Don't you get discouraged on no matter where you at. But it's important to know where you at and for you to know the trajectory so that you can know what you need to do to get to that next level. All right. So I hope this helped you. I hope this blessed you. All right. I always say, make sure you get out of your head and go get into this world because your head is a dangerous place to live. All right. And also remember, the more you study, the less you worry. So get locked in. Go get in your locked in phase so that you're not worried about what's going on and you know and you got confidence in your skill set and your ability as a trader because you've done enough research and you understand the game enough to know what's going on. All right. So I'll see you guys tomorrow in the next video. Tomorrow I'm going live for the Sunday watch list at 12 p.m. Pacific and then 3 p.m. Eastern. All right. So I'm going to see you guys tomorrow. I'm going to holla at you. Peace.